What you're looking at here is a little chart I made up of all the point changes of all the orc units from the index. If you don't realize it, all the indexes and rule books have been completely leaked out on the internet and are readily available as PDF files. So I got a chance to look through it, and across the board for the orcs, everything got more expensive. And from what I've been looking at, most things got more expensive, essentially. Pretty much across the board on all armies. So it looks like when they say that a 1500 point game is only going to take 90 minutes, that's because you're going to have 2/3 the models you have now. And the gameplay itself might be generally faster, but I think there's just, in general, going to be fewer models on the board for a given points level than there was in 7th and before. There was a trend over many years that things kept getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And that seems to have done a 180 on that, and everything's just gotten more expensive, especially the big things, I guess, like Knights and Riptides have all gone way up in price. And if you even look at that, the Stompa has gone up. What is that? The Stompa is up 27%. So it's nearly 1,000 points for the Stompa now. So there are some comments I want to make about the changes, but it's really hard to talk about these things in a vacuum of looking at just the rules for one army, because you have to take into account that everything has changed. So it's not, you can't think of this in terms of comparing it to the way the game plays now against the armies you see now. It's not going to be the same, because every army is different. It's the whole picture of every single faction put together, and the new rules. And so just looking at the points changes or things in the book or one army list by itself isn't going to help you any. Is not going to tell you really anything about how it's going to do. I'm going to tell you some things I really don't like, and not from a power level perspective, but just in general things that I like to do. First and foremost, there is no looted wagon rules, which is a big disappointment. You know, in the last book they had to add those in at the last minute under in White Dwarf, but now there's just nothing there at all. There's no rules for Gruckface Rippa, which that model is still on the shelves, still on the website. So I think that will probably be something they have to fix sooner than later, because a lot of people have that model. The model's still available. It still has its own specific 7th edition rules in the box. So they're going to have to take care of Gruckface Rippa. And probably the biggest disappointment to me entirely is that boys no longer have the option of heavy armor. It's just not there at all. They could have easily made a Art Boys unit an elite, just like in the 3rd edition codex. But there isn't any such option anymore, which is extremely disappointing, because a 4-up armor save, even in this new book, is even way better than a 6-up than it was in the previous edition, I should say. Sure, they say you get a 6-up save against a lot more things that you didn't before, but it's a 6-up save. It's not much. And if you have a pain boy nearby, you get a 6-up and a 6-up, which means 1 out of every 30. Not 1 out of every 36 is the other way. But I don't know. I don't want to do the math right now, but you're not going to be saving a lot when you're rolling a 6 and then a 6. The KFF, unfortunately, is not the conga line I thought it was going to be. The whole unit has to be within 9 inches of the KFF to get the benefit. So even if like one orc is outside that 9 inches, the whole unit loses the entire save, which is disappointing. But probably balanced, because you can see the big mech with KFF, just a straight up big mech, went down in points, so the KFF is quite a bit cheaper for a longer range and a universal invul save for a whole unit. No, it's just the models, but the models have to be under actually worse now, because before, at least the model, once he got past the guys that were outside the KFF, it would get to the point where you have the invul save. Now you don't get it at all unless all the models in. Well, I guess that's exactly the same. You just take the models off that are outside the KFF from the first shooting attack, second shooting attack. Now you're under the KFF. So I guess it's the same, but it's a lot cheaper. So maybe it's not quite that bad, and it's a bigger range. It's 9 inches, so that's quite a bit of bubble. But again, it's the same thing once it's in a vehicle. It's only for the vehicle, not a bubble around it. So I think a big mech on a bike with a KFF. I didn't put that on the list here. I'm disappointed the Weird Boy doesn't have a level 2 upgrade option. I don't really call it level 2 here, but you know, the ability to cast a second power a turn. It doesn't have that ability. It's just 1 power a turn, one deny the witch a turn. Bikes got more expensive, which is no surprise because bikes were way undercosted in the previous book. They did, however, lose any form of an exhaust cloud rule. There's just nothing. And just as I said, just in general, there's a lot of little details which I'll go over once I start going over individual data slates that I think are fun. Like the close combat weapons on the Gorkanaut and Morkanaut, you can either attack with their normal attacks at strength times 2, or use their base strength and get 3 attacks per attack. And since they have a base strength of 8, and you lose some AP on it too, so. But yeah, you can put out a lot of attacks from those guys. And like strength 16 compared to strength 8 is really not going to be a huge difference against most things. It's only when it gets munching up onto like vehicles and stuff you have to worry about the higher strength. So yeah, that's about it. I mean, we all know Pain Boys are only a 6-up feeling pain instead of a 5-up. Mad Dakos has the ability to heal wounds, so he's not too badly priced, for sure. Pain Boys come with PK standard, as a standard war gear, so that's kind of nice. They have them a decent weapon. So you couldn't even take one before at all. And Turks got way more expensive, and I think they're probably well priced. They've got a lot of wounds and decent toughness. And the ramshackle rule is almost the exact same ramshackle rule that I came up with. I'm kind of proud of myself. Whereas that on a 6-up, multi-wound damages only do 1 wound. So I was expecting it to just be across the board, but it looks like it's if a roll is 6. Could have been nicer, have been something else, like a 4. But yeah, so generally overall, I'm really excited. There's a lot of fun things. I mean, there's going to be lots of rule stackings. Like with Shooter Boys, you can run and shoot. And then if you have a war boss nearby, you can still charge. And I don't think you have to charge the same unit you shot. So you can shoot one thing with the Shooter Boys and then charge something else. It is possible to stack up boys, do 6 attacks each. Believe it or not. So they have 2 base attacks still, fortunately. Get +1 for the choppa. They get +1 if there's more than 20 in the unit, which they're probably never going to have by the time you get into combat, thanks to this lack of heavy armor. You can get +1 attack if you have Gazgul nearby, and you have another +1 attack from the Psychic Power. So you could have 6 attacks per Ork Boy. And there's also, it's not on the list here because there's no equivalent model, but there's a knob with War Banner, where anybody within 6 inches gets +1 to hit. So you could have 6 attacks per boy hitting on 2s. Oh, and the other big thing is that instead of dealing with Furious Charge, basically they just made every orc furiously charged all the time. So essentially everything is +1 strength over what it was. All the time. Which is fantastic. I'm not going to complain about that at all. So what's going to happen in 8th edition, I think, is that the games are probably going to go way up in points for what they are now. I think games are going to play faster. Things are going to die faster. And so just playing the 1850 or 1500 point games that you play now are going to be so fast it's not going to be exciting. So you might even see 2000 be the new standard, or maybe even in a tournament setting, you might even see 2500 or 2250 to fill in. Because do you really want short games? I don't know. Some people do. But I guess in a tournament setting, we're used to that 2.5 hour time frame. So I think to get a 2.5-hour game, you're going to have to push over 2,000 points. I mean, right now at 1850, there's a significant number of games that don't finish. But I'm sure a lot of that is from Psychic Phase. Stupid summoning takes so long to do. And other things take a long time to do. But anyway, I won't get into that. But I don't think 1850 and the new system is going to be like half the time of what it is now. Because the rules just move so fast. And I said everything costs more, especially the better they are, the more exponentially high they went up. Yeah, so that's where we're at. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of details for individual units. Overall, I have, other than losing my heavy armor, I'm not having a whole lot of issues with this. As far as, from trying to take a look at it from the big picture, which is the only way you can do it. You can't look at one army list. You can't think like you do in 7th edition anyway. As I said, if these were the rules we had in 7th edition, it would be horrible. It would just get shot off the board before we could ever get anywhere. But when you look at the big picture, I've been looking at the other rules, it's difficult to conceptualize, but not impossible. Because we really are going to be concentrating on what this army does instead of what your opponent is doing. Which is the way to play Orks. You don't worry about what they're doing. You don't necessarily act. You play your game, which is run forward and beat him hit him in the face. That's the Ork army. But I think there's going to be a lot of fun tricks. I mean, bikes are still not bad. You can still put... They did drop them down to only 12 models per unit instead of 15. That's kind of disappointing. So you can still put your biker boss, your biker pain boss, right in the middle. And... do the advance, and I think War Boss is going to do the advance on bikes. I'm not sure. I'll have to double check. But you can still do, and you can also get the connect with the KFF on bike. So you can, once again, you can still have your bike star. It'll cost a few more points. Not a whole lot. Oh, and there's one last thing you note on this chart here where it says boss knobs are free. There's no points to pay to upgrade to the boss knob for each individual unit. So your knob upgrades, just the knob itself is free. So there's no reason to not ever take a knob in every unit, even if you just do it for the extra wound. So I think I rambled on long enough. We got 2 weeks to go here to the official release, and when there is the official release and I have the actual physical books in my hand, we'll be talking a lot more detail, especially once I get some 8th edition games under my belt. Well, thanks for listening to me ramble, and again, I'm really excited. I really don't have a huge lot of complaints. I don't have a lot of salt here at all. A lot of people out there are extremely salty, especially the Tau players, from what I've been able to gather. But in general, anyone who's really disappointed about what they see in their index isn't accounting for the changes to everything else around them. Thanks for watching.